Okay, so this is the debut album from heavy metal veterans ExpiatoriA, who hail from Genoa, Italy. We were sent this by our friend Enrico Maloney from the band Icatan, who recently joined ExpiatoriA on drums. You can check out a review of Icatan's excellent 2020 EP back on episode 14, The Scratch Cast, and we also interviewed them last year, which is a good chat, and that's well worth checking out if you're interested. Now, ExpiatoriA were formed way back in 1987, which is
the year you were born.
And it's pretty mental to think that having formed 35 years ago, this is just the band's debut album. I think they have released a few EPs and things over the years, and there have been kind of various different lineups, but
yeah, I think they've changed lineups a few times.
Yeah, but interestingly, these are all new songs. They're not just re-recordings of older materials. These songs have been written in the past couple of years as well. So it's not just that they've just taken some of these old songs and dusted them off and re-recorded them. This is new material, and so like I said, they've gone through several lineup changes over the years before settling on the current incarnation of David Krieg on vocals, Massimo Malachina on guitar, Eduardo Napoli on guitar, Giambattista Malachina on bass, Flux on keyboards, and of course Enrico Maloney on drums. Although I think it was a slightly different lineup again that actually recorded the album.
Yeah, because is it not a Stefano Caprilli, I don't know why I put an accent on there, on drums?
Yes, there's definitely someone different on drums, maybe even on keyboards. Although it could just be the real name of Flux. Sure, that's not his Christian name. Anyway, so in describing their sound, the band have name-checked the likes of Merciful Fate and Candlemass, and just generally describe themselves as old-school heavy metal and prog. I'm not super au fait with either of those bands, but there's a few other kind of bands in the mix that we'll touch on as we go through each of these tracks, because there's only 6 tracks, although they are all really long. The album's 43 minutes roughly, with just 6 tracks. So I think with the exception of track 5, they're all at least 7 minutes, or one's maybe just under 7 minutes, but they're pretty much all 7 minutes or more. One of them's nearly 10 minutes. So these are very long songs. So if you don't have an attention span, then this is not the band for you.
And I think it's fair to say that, as well as that being long songs, they're dense. They're dense, atmospheric, brooding songs. All the type of thing that you would expect from this type of band.
Yes, it's like, I mean, it's they're saying old school heavy metal, but it's sort of, it's doomy, it's proggy, it's gothic, and that gothic sound kind of includes the subject matter of the songs as well when you sort of dive into some of the lyrics. And we were going to record this a week ago. And
exactly a week ago.
We were going to record this a week ago, and I'd done all my notes except for this album, and had like 1 hour before we were going to record, and I hadn't listened to it, and I was going to like try and listen to this and take some notes, and then try and record the podcast. And
you can't.
We were both like, that's
madness.
Impossible. It's complete madness. Well, I mean, 43 minutes of that hour would be just listening to the album, so it's like. And you can't just listen to this album once and then collect your thoughts on it. It just wouldn't be doing it justice. So the album kicks off with the song "When Darkness Falls," which has got quite a satisfying stomp to the drums. It's got these chunky, classic sounding heavy metal riffs, some nice bending guitar licks. I think the opening vocals in the verse were a little bit jarring for me at first. There's a few satisfying moments in there, particularly there's a lyric that goes "by the devil's hand," which the first time it comes around is just like in quite a sort of deep tone, and then the second time it comes around, it's in like full heavy metal falsetto in the style of like King Diamond or that kind of thing. If if you don't know King Diamond, then go and listen to the song Abigail, and you'll get the idea. But it's that sort of really high pitched falsetto, almost shrieking kind of delivery, and it's almost comical. If you're not used to that kind of music, but it is a kind of trope of heavy metal, but I find it particularly satisfying.
Yeah, I enjoyed that, and I think it's fair to say that the kind of vocals to begin with are a bit, I don't know how to. It's very much in keeping with the genre, but yeah, it's very gloomy, oppressive. Maybe not the right word to use, but yeah, I can get that. So it was a bit difficult for me to listen to it first, because I wouldn't say that this stuff's normally in my kind of wheelhouse. But saying that, those bits that you mentioned were definitely a high point. I did really enjoy that, and I did enjoy the bit where I think he's kind of singing as the devil.
Yeah,
I loved that. I did love that. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I couldn't quite work out some of the words, so I found there's a lyric video on YouTube. So I found the lyrics for that part, and I found it really good, and it's delivered almost like a Hammer horror film. You can imagine like Peter Cushing or Christopher Lee delivering those lines like as the devil, and it goes when the shadows creep. I'll do it in the voice. I don't know if I can do it, man. When the shadows creep over the landscape, when the clouds I can't do it. When the shadows creep over the landscape, when the clouds veil the face of the moon, when the woven hour draws near and the mortals dream about me, or something to that effect.
That's pretty good, man. That's pretty impressive.
Without all the kind of screw ups in between, but that's a particularly memorable bit, and like I said, it's just got that kind of Hammer horror kind of feel about it, which I suppose is a kind of theme of heavy metal in particular, because it's quite heavy, but it's also quite theatrical in the kind of sense of like maybe like Alice Cooper is quite theatrical.
Yeah.
And that continues straight away in the beginning of Ombra or Tenebra Part 2.
Yeah, which, I've said in my notes, again, another really long number. I don't know if I've got this right, but it's just under 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
9 minutes 37 seconds. Opens with that gloomy horror movie-esque organs or keys. The song opens up at around the kind of 1 minute 45 mark with Italian lyrics.
Yeah, I think they might be.
Yeah, so I kind of did a wee bit of reading about what Ombra means, because it's called Ombra Tenebra Part 2. So Ombra means shadow or shade, or according to Google Translate, in the Veneto dialect means something else, so entirely. A little glass of wine, however, I think it's pretty safe to say that, it most likely means shadow in this context.
Yeah.
So I think the title, when translated, means shadow, darkness, wall, or dark, something like that anyway. Again, has that kind of gloomy, kind of oppressive feel, kind of similar to the first track. However, again, quite like, as I said, when we've kind of been discussing some of the other artists that we've covered this time round, there's the introduction of female vocals on this number, which again, really enjoyed that kind of juxtaposition, and I felt as if it complemented Craig's kind of vocals really well. Again, it almost felt as if it was like 3 different songs in a way.
I mean, that's just kind of the nature of prog and having a song that's nearly 10 minutes long. It's got to change, or it'll just get boring.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I thought that you've got that sort of classic horror theme in the opening. It sounds a bit like sort of Phantom of the Opera or something like that. Like you can imagine it played on organs. It's got that kind of sound, and then it kind of moves into this quite demented sounding clean guitar piece, and it reminds me a bit of Metallica's Fade to Black. It's got that sort of classic tone that you don't really hear as much in like modern metal, and it's just a tone that I really love. And the guest vocals, I think her name's Rafaela Canguero. They were a real highlight. They're quite haunting vocals, and then there's some really good guitar moments later in the song as well. I've mentioned Metallica. I think I don't mean in terms of like thrash Metallica, like speed Metallica. Just some of the guitar tones and some of the riffs and things. I think there's maybe parts of kind of Iron Maiden in some of these songs as well. And I think there's like hints to sort of symphonic metal and operatic metal bands like sort of Queensryche and Demons and Wizards or like Blind Guardian. Like these are all kind of weird bands that I was listening to in my teenage years. But I think Expiatoria kind of managed to pull it off without kind of flying up their own arses, which I think some of those bands suffer from. But yeah, it's all very gothic and sort of demonic and quite theatrical, but a little bit over the top at times, but not too much. So you've got that sort of 10-minute opus, and then the next track, The Wrong Side of Love, it's got these kind of fuzzed up chugging guitars, got an infectious stomp. There's a pretty cool riff around the sort of 2-minute 20 mark, and it's got this kind of evil scream of cold as ice. I just like the way that's delivered. And there's some dueling guitars in there about a minute later, and there's sort of quite a crazy solo around the 4-minute 45 mark as well that really stood out on that track. Track 4, 7 Chairs and a Portrait, was a standout for me. It kind of reinforces those gothic horror themes. This time it actually has those kind of creepy horror movie organs.
Church bells.
Yeah. There's quite a fun sounding guitar lick. It comes in at one point. The drums kind of go sort of double time, I think. It's almost like blast beats.
Yeah, I did feel as if that was a bit too short-lived for my liking, though. I'd like to have seen a bit more of that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And there's a pretty awesome guitar solo about halfway through. Works quite well with the vocals when they come back in as well. And another guitar solo near the end. I mean, there's fucking just guitar solos all over this album, and the lyrics on this song, I mean, on the album as a whole, the lyrics are quite vivid if you dig into them. And I mean, I've not really done that on all the songs because I don't think I've listened to it enough to really get into them. But on this song in particular, the kind of the last portion of the song I really enjoyed, so I'm just going to recite the whole thing again. I'm not going to do the voice this time because it's screwed it up so badly last time. But it goes, effluvium of mystic fumes exalts this gathering of grieving players. Through the dark they brandish candles in procession like monks in morn. 7 chairs and a portrait of a lady dressed in purple and red. Weird black mass, ritual bizarre, which goals and meanings are unknown and unheard. One by one the acolytes, they disappear, abducted by the portrait, no trace of them, nor the house itself, just a dream within a dream of a sick and lost mind.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
And I feel like you could probably dig into the lyrics in a lot of these tracks and find sort of similar passages. Well, we've had that example from the devil on
himself
the track, from the devil himself on the opening track. Yeah, I'm surprised it didn't strike me down when I was reciting that passage.
He'll visit in the witching hour, man. Like he'll visit at like 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever. That's when all those things happen, isn't it? He'll just be taken away.
After midnight, taken away to the netherworld. There's actually a good line on the opening track. It's something like, I pledge allegiance to the things below. That's what it is.
Yeah, I do remember that.
I quite like that. So 7 Chairs and a Portrait was a standout for me. I really like that last sort of section. I think that is in the song earlier on as well, but I just like the way it ends because that sort of last, I think the final word, mind. So it's just a dream within a dream of a sick and lost mind. And I think the way the word mind is emphasised kind of like is it sort of punctuates the song in a certain way, which I quite liked. And then probably my favourite song is
Asylum of the Damned.
Asylum of the Damned. Which is weirdly the shortest song. But,
and the brightest number on the album, purely instrumental from what I remember. At least initially, it opens with this kind of mellow panpipes and flutes, kind of floaty, ethereal sounding guitars. It does kind of feel as if it kind of allows the album to breathe a wee bit. But there's a saxophone in there as well, from what I remember.
It's like an incredible saxophone solo on it, Grant. It's just it's just a big part of the song. I think that's why I like it so much.
Because that gets more kind of frenzied and erratic as the type. Yeah, I did enjoy that.
Yeah, and like I think I've listened to this album 3 times, and every time when it gets to that song, I'm like, yes. I think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Like I think saxophone like works really well in heavy metal. I think because it could be quite it could be quite demented. I think that works really well with the themes of heavy metal, just kind of chaotic, sort of unhinged kind of sound you can get from a saxophone. Just works.
Look at how expertly performed it is in bands like Viagra Boys, for example. Like it's like a caged beast.
Yeah, exactly. And then it can be it's like such a kind of versatile. Well, it's not the only versatile instrument. It can be like really romantic, and like Careless Whisper or whatever. But then it can be this absolute monster. But you could say that for lots of instruments, I suppose.
Yeah, I feel you'll probably take up the saxophone at some point. The Sasquatch.
Yeah, I feel like my neighbours would like petition to have me thrown out of the building if I took up saxophone.
Do you know, this is totally off topic, but did you know that Clyde, as from Bonnie and Clyde, played the saxophone?
No, I did not.
Picked it up watching a movie about them the other night. It's just an image of him playing the saxophone just before he goes and shoots somebody the next day.
Have you got any more Bonnie and Clyde facts you'd like to share?
Not today. Not today. Tune in next time.
We'll do a spin-off Bonnie and Clyde podcast. Bonnie and Clyde and saxophone podcast. Right, let's getting back to what we're actually talking about. We've got the last track, album closer, Krieg, My Last Song.
Yeah, so obviously there's been a number of kind of lineup changes over the course of the years. Is this him saying that he's possibly leaving, or is there a kind of backstory to that?
I've no idea. I mean, like from the name, it kind of sounds like it, and I mean, when you listen to the song, it kind of feels like a journey.
Yeah.
I don't know. It brings back that sort of King Diamond falsetto vocal from the first track, which doesn't really you don't really hear it again after the first, that very short bit on the first track, and then it comes back here. So it feels like it's sort of closing the loop a little bit. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the significance of that song name is, but it's a good way to close the album. I quite like how there's quite a sort of plodding pace to the drums. The bass is quite grumbly. I like the clang on the Queen guitars. You've got the moody vocals. So I suppose it does feel a bit like a lament. But then you get those chugging guitars that come in after about 2 minutes or so. Really infectious. And then there's quite lots of like demonic kind of flourishes throughout the track. So yeah, I quite enjoyed that one. Good way to close the album.
Yeah. What was your thoughts overall?
So I quite like this. I think there's a lot to kind of dive into. And like I said, I've picked out some of the lyrics here and there, but I don't think I've really scratched the surface in terms of maybe the sort of stories that are buried in there. And like, I think if you're a fan of old school heavy metal, you'll get a lot out of it. Early Metallica, Iron Maiden. I mentioned some other operatic kind of metal bands. I think there's maybe stuff like bands like Halloween and Gamma Bomb as well, albeit not like nowhere near as fast. But yeah, there's a lot to like on here. I think some of the vocals are a bit shaky here and there, but there are some really good vocal moments as well. So on balance, I've gone for an 8 out of 10 because I do really like it.
Yeah, I've I haven't given it a rating because I'm not 100% sure. As I said earlier on, this isn't my wheelhouse, so I don't know how likely I am to go back and listen to it. And with that in mind, I haven't given it a rating. What I have said, like these guys have been going for as long as I've been alive, so
yeah,
and it's clearly a labour of love for them. And this album, as I've said kind of quite a few times, kind of really dense, atmospheric album. There's very little in terms of a reprieve from that, other than that kind of change of direction which we get with regards to Asylum of the Damned. To be honest, Asylum of the Damned, okay, we've got that kind of frenzied kind of saxophone with it being a bit like a caged beast, as we kind of said earlier on, but it certainly wasn't the beast that I was expecting from a kind of song title like that to be honest. So that was pretty cool. Obviously, with regards to the vocals, you said they're a bit shaky. I think I'm not all that well acquainted with this type of stuff, but I think it's very much in keeping with that quintessentially kind of gothic rock style. I did really enjoy when he got the opportunity to kind of show off his vocal prowess, and he kind of hit those kind of high notes. That was proper badass top tier stuff. Like I did enjoy that. I think the musicianship's great. The band kind of definitely have a flair for creating that kind of dark, gloomy, sludgy guitar riffs. There was a few times where we kind of discussed it kind of ramping up a gear, and I can't remember what song it was, but yeah. There's been a few times where I'd just like to see a bit more of that type of stuff. But then in speaking to you, and you kind of pointing out the lyrics, like I like lyrics. I usually go in for the lyrics more than the musicianship sometimes. And I remember years ago I got well into like Edgar Allan Poe had like a big compendium of all these works. I've still got it somewhere. And I haven't probably sat with this album as long as I could have. Similar to yourself, and maybe only listened to it kind of 2 or 3 times. But I wonder if I was to spend a bit more time with it, I'd get a bit more of appreciation for the kind of wordsmanship, because I do like that. And you kind of reciting the lyrics from 7 Cheers and a Portrait was pretty cool. That's kind of pretty poetic. Without sounding like a wank, like it is, isn't it? It's cool. So yeah, I think I need to kind of spend a bit more time with it, but I'm gonna stand back from giving it a rating for those reasons, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. You've kind of justified that. So I think this is, when you think of metal, you think of like being sort of difficult to listen to and that kind of stuff. But I think like older style heavy metal it's an easier listening experience than maybe some more modern, more extreme types of metal. This is not like it's not Anna on the Thrack. It's not that abrasive. I think it's heavy, but it's also quite fun. Yeah, all right. So that is Shadows, the debut album from ExpiatoriA.
Where the shadows creep over the landscape. It's not finished. It's finished.